At exactly 12 p.m. on June 25th, 2009, the doors to room 12 swung open and the paramedics stepped into a scene that felt unreal. What they saw didn't look like the superstar the world called the king of pop. It looked like a man who had been pushed way past his limits. Michael Jackson, the kid from Gary, Indiana, who danced his way into music history, was lying still, barely weighing anything at all, looking completely worn out. His stomach was almost empty, his body showing signs of long-term medical strain, and even his famous hair turned out to be a carefully placed wig, attached after years of tough procedures. That old Pepsi accident people always talked about had left more lasting damage than most ever knew. Hours later, the autopsy report landed on the coroner's desk. It was a serious truth that hit harder than anything the tabloids ever printed. The truth was so wild that people didn't even want to believe it at first. And now, after 15 years of silence, the real question is back in the spotlight. What actually went down in Michael Jackson's final 24 hours? Inside the examination room, everything felt cold, metallic, and way too quiet. Nothing like the massive arenas he once controlled with just a single move. When the sheet was lifted, even the most experienced investigators froze for a second, stunned by what they were seeing. This didn't look like the body of a worldwide legend. It looked like someone who had been dealing with heavy pain and pressure for a long time. The first shock came from the numbers, 51 kilograms. For a man around 6 feet tall, that meant he looked extremely drained, like his body had been running on empty for far too long. Worn down by stress and non-stop demands. His frame looked tired, worn, and pushed way past normal limits, showing signs of someone who had been struggling just to keep going.
None of it's true. It's BS. They made it up. They lie. They don't want to give me credit for anything. One paper said I had each, because I was growing a little beard, he had each little hair transplanted into his face with a lasered in.
When the coroner checked his stomach, he expected to find at least a little something from the night before, but what he found only raised more questions. Instead of finding a normal meal, the coroner found almost nothing at all. No veggies, no bread, no real food, just a dissolving pill and a little bit of liquid medicine. The same man who once moonwalked across every stage on Earth had stepped into his final day with a stomach running on fumes, and that alone shocked everyone. Then the focus shifted to his arms. Both of his forearms showed clusters of places where medical injections had been used over time. Some newer, some older, some barely healing. The skin looked worn from repeated medical treatment, like his body had been stuck in a long cycle of trying to rest but never truly getting there. This wasn't about chasing a thrill.
How ignorant is that? I can't even grow a beard now? The ignorant fool who wrote such a thing. So don't believe that stupidity. Don't waste your money on it. Because when you're buying it, you're not buying something based on what's true. It's not the truth. It's garbage.
This was about someone trying desperately to get sleep, something so basic that his body couldn't naturally find anymore. But the detail that hit the room the hardest came from his scalp. When the coroners carefully checked his head, they found what people had whispered about ever since that Pepsi accident back in 1984. The old burn areas hadn't fully recovered, leaving the skin tight and uneven in spots where natural hair should have grown. Instead, technicians found a skillfully placed wig attached with medical adhesive to protect the sensitive areas and keep his appearance stable for the public eye. Every part of this revealed how much he had been carrying behind the scenes.
How are you feeling at this time about the success of Thriller? I mean, the music business isn't exactly going gangbusters, and yet you continue to sell records so well.
Every time I get a platinum album, it's never taken lightly on my behalf. I'm always honored, and it's great thanks. You know, I'm very happy that the public enjoy what I do, and I'll continue to put my heart into my work.
Under the bright lights of the examination room, the image the world knew began to fade, revealing years of real physical struggle hidden behind hats, wigs, and carefully styled stage looks. As the exam continued down his torso, another surprise came up. Several ribs had been fractured, but not from anything that happened before he passed. These breaks came from the paramedics fighting hard to bring him back, pushing on a chest that had grown way too thin and fragile to handle that kind of pressure. One investigator later said in private, "This wasn't a superstar's body. This was the body of a man pushed past the limit of survival." And that statement shook everyone who heard it.
So I'll take that and use that as the main foundation for the track and build all the sounds around that. those rhythms.
The examination showed that Michael Jackson didn't pass in a single moment. His health had been fading quietly, long before June 25th, like his body had been fighting a long battle no one truly saw. If the medical exam showed what happened physically, then the 60 days leading up to his passing showed why. Every dancer from the This Is It rehearsals shared the same thing. Michael wasn't sleeping at all. Not a little, not poorly, but literally not sleeping in any real way, and it had everyone around him worried. His personal doctor, Dr. Conrad Murray, later stated under oath that Michael had gone weeks without even a single minute of natural sleep, something no human body can handle for long. That lack of rest created a dangerous situation, one that grew stronger day by day until it became impossible to ignore.
This kid, don't look at me, Frank.
Let's do that. Hold on for a second.
Yeah, don't make faces.
His body could lie down and his eyes could shut, but his mind refused to drift off, like he was trapped in a sleepless zone he couldn't break out of. During rehearsals at the Staples Center, people noticed a seriously unsettling contrast. Behind the scenes, he looked worn out, his hands shaky, his voice thin, sometimes even needing support just to move down a short hallway. His eyes looked distant, almost like he was fighting to stay alert, as if his brain was carrying extra weight. But the second he stepped onto the stage, everything changed. The lights hit him, and suddenly the shaking stopped. His voice got stronger, and his moves snapped into place with that classic precision everyone knew. For those short moments, he transformed back into Michael Jackson, a name loaded with history, pressure, and respect. But the second rehearsal ended, the whole image fell apart again. Crew members said he would drop into a chair, breathing hard.
Michael, why is it, do you think, that you're able to cross over when so many others aren't able to, from R&B to pop? I mean, it's like a natural for you. You have something within your records that everybody just loves.
Boy, I couldn't say. I just created, and I'm honored that the public enjoy what I do. I couldn't explain why, the anatomy of why it happens.
There's a formula?
Not that I know of.
Sweat rolling down his back, whispering that he needed real sleep or he wouldn't make it to opening night. They could see he was pushing himself further than any person should. Then came the line he said, the one that still chills everyone who heard it, a quiet sentence that made people realize things were much worse than they understood. There's something wrong. I can feel it. That's what Michael told people close to him. Dancers, friends, even family members. He said it more than once, and everyone had their own idea of what he meant. Some thought he was talking about the pressure around him. Some thought he meant the industry pushing him too hard, and others believed he was worried about certain people in his circle. But nobody knew exactly who or what had him feeling so uneasy. Around the security team, quiet talk started spreading about an unexpected visitor who showed up on the night of June 24th, just hours before everything changed. The person was escorted upstairs and stayed for less than 30 minutes. Their name was never shared publicly, and they weren't included in the official timeline at all, which only made fans keep debating who that person was and why they showed up so late. Meanwhile, the medical situation behind closed doors was getting out of control. Michael had been asking for sleep help for a long time, and when regular medication stopped working, he begged for stronger medical support. He even asked for propofol, a hospital-level anesthetic that's normally used only during surgery. That shows how desperate he was for real rest. That kind of exhaustion isn't normal, it's extreme, and everyone around him could see he was worn thin. Investigators later looked through phone records and found a message he sent to someone he trusted just days before things went wrong. The message was simple, but showed how overwhelmed he felt. My mind won't shut off. That one line made it clear just how much he was struggling to find a moment of peace. I'm scared to close my eyes. That's what he told someone close to him. And when you combine that with the heavy rehearsals, the pressure of a 50-show comeback, and the fact that his body was barely keeping up, a darker picture starts to form. Michael wasn't living those last 60 days. He was pushing through them day by day, trying to hold everything together. Every night on that rehearsal stage, he looked worn out, almost like he was carrying the weight of his own legend on his shoulders. And every morning, he woke up looking even more drained, like he knew exactly how close he was to burning out completely. He talked about it, he warned people, he tried to explain it, but the world wasn't ready to hear him. Then came the night before everything changed. Witnesses still say it was the most electrifying rehearsal he'd given in years. Staples Center, Los Angeles, June 24th, 2009. The massive arena only had dancers, lighting crews, and tech teams inside, people who had spent weeks watching him fight through exhaustion. But on this night, something flipped. Around 8:30 p.m., he walked onto the stage with a steady, calm energy nobody had seen from him in weeks. The lights dropped, the music kicked in, and suddenly Michael delivered the full choreography for They Don't Care About Us, with razor-sharp movements that made everyone's jaw drop. To the people in that arena, it felt like a comeback right in front of their eyes, like the tired man backstage had suddenly stepped aside and the legend returned for one last moment. Footage from that night later showed up in the This Is It documentary, turning the moment into history forever. But people who stood there in real time said the cameras missed a lot. They noticed how Michael leaned on the railing while climbing a short staircase, how he paused longer than normal before taking his spot, and how he pressed his hand to his ribs after a tough dance break. These were small signs that he was fighting heavy fatigue, even while trying to stay in control. But the moment the music kicked in, he flipped like a switch. He rehearsed all the way until 11:45 p.m., pushing through sharp choreography and detailed vocals that would have worn out performers decades younger. The dancers hyped him up, and Kenny Ortega, the tour director, said it looked like Michael had found a spark that had been missing for weeks. Even the security team, who had gotten used to escorting a tired figure to his car, felt a little hope light back up. When he stepped off the stage for the final time, he turned to one of the dancers, gave a faint, gentle smile, and said his last public words, "We must be perfect tomorrow." His voice sounded soft and determined, like he was giving himself a last bit of strength to hold on to. From there, he walked toward his waiting vehicle. Witnesses said that as soon as he left the sturdy stage and touched the concrete walkway, that powerful energy faded. His posture shifted, his shoulders dipped, and one guard said it looked like watching a balloon slowly lose air. Quiet, tired, worn down. When he got home at about 12:15 a.m., he looked exhausted. He didn't eat dinner, he didn't rush to change clothes, he simply told a staff member, "I have to sleep, I have to be ready." Those words would echo through the investigation because they weren't just about pressure. They were a sign of real desperation. Michael knew his body couldn't take another day without proper rest. And after weeks of nonstop insomnia, the night of June 24th became the turning point, the moment where exhaustion turned into a serious crisis. What happened between 1:30 a.m. and 5 a.m. wasn't rumor. It was recorded in sworn court testimony, medical notes, and statements given under oath. Around 1:30 a.m., Michael told Dr. Conrad Murray that he still couldn't fall asleep. The rehearsal had pushed his adrenaline sky high, and when that rush faded, the insomnia came back even harder. Murray later claimed he tried gentle calming techniques, breathing routines, small talk, anything to bring Michael down from that wired state. But Michael kept pacing around, restless and anxious, whispering, "If I don't sleep, I won't make it through tomorrow." His stress level was clearly through the roof. Around 2 a.m., Murray gave him a standard sedative meant to settle the mind. In most people, that type of medication would bring on solid rest, but Michael stayed awake, eyes open, breathing fast, fidgeting with the bed sheets like his body couldn't switch off no matter what. By 3 a.m. to 4 a.m., his distress had grown even worse. Murray gave another commonly used sedative, hoping it would finally help him rest. But again, no real sleep came. Michael's body wasn't reacting the way a typical person's would, and that shocked medical experts later on. They testified that the amount he was given between 1:30 and 3:30 a.m. would usually put a healthy adult into deep rest, yet Michael stayed alert, showing just how overwhelmed and unbalanced his system had become. His body had been dealing with long-term stress, weeks without real sleep, and layers of medication meant to help him rest. So at that point, his system wasn't reacting normally anymore. Investigators later confirmed that during those hours, Michael kept repeating that he felt like something bad would happen if he didn't finally get some sleep. Not as a dramatic line, but as someone who was genuinely scared about his health and how drained he felt. By around 4 in the morning, his exhaustion had shifted into full-on panic. He sat up in bed shaking, saying he felt strangely awake but also disconnected from everything around him. It was the kind of mental fog people get when they've stayed awake far longer than the body can handle safely. Murray later said that during this time, Michael asked him again for propofol, the hospital-grade anesthetic he had used on earlier nights to get temporary deep rest. Nurses and medical experts would later call that moment a major warning sign. Propofol isn't a normal sleep aid. It's a powerful anesthetic used only in operating rooms with full monitoring, special equipment, and trained teams watching every second. But Michael wasn't thinking about medical risks at that point. He was thinking about making it through the next day. The pressure of 50 comeback shows, the money behind them, the cameras, and the huge expectations waiting for him. By 5 a.m., after hours of trying everything and still not getting any real rest, the situation had reached a breaking point. Everyone who reviewed the timeline agreed that his body had been pushed far beyond what it could safely handle, and the night was about to take a serious turn. Michael reportedly repeated the same line Murray later shared in court, Just make me sleep. I need to sleep. By this time, the sun was creeping over Los Angeles, and the night had shifted into something far more serious than regular insomnia. It had become total exhaustion that his body couldn't fight anymore. Between 5:30 a.m. and 10:40 a.m., investigators marked a section they now call the missing hours, a stretch where the exact moment-to-moment details were never fully confirmed. What is known is that Michael never reached real deep rest. He slipped in and out lightly, but his mind didn't fully switch off, not even once. By mid-morning, he was still awake, still worn down, and still desperate for relief. A little after 10:30 a.m., Murray made a choice that later sparked global controversy. He prepared a small amount of propofol, saying under oath that he believed it would give Michael around 15 minutes of rest, just enough to settle his system. He described it as a light dose, something he thought would help bridge the gap into natural sleep. But anesthesiologists around the world later testified that any amount of propofol requires full hospital-level monitoring, oxygen support, and proper equipment. Michael's bedroom had none of that. At 10:40 a.m., Murray administered the dose. The room was quiet, curtains pulled tight, an IV line hanging from a simple portable stand, and a basic pulse monitor sitting on the nightstand but not hooked up the way medical guidelines require. There was no oxygen tank, no emergency setup, just a doctor, a patient, and a medication meant strictly for controlled surgical environments. Within moments, Michael's breathing slowed and his body finally relaxed for the first time in days, maybe even weeks. Witnesses later said he looked calm, like he had finally found a moment of peace after the longest stretch of exhaustion he had ever faced. Around 10:50 a.m., Murray later claimed he noticed Michael had gone completely silent. He called his name, but there was no reaction. He checked for a pulse and couldn't find one. Investigators would later uncover a detail that changed everything. Help wasn't called right away. There was a delay long enough to spark questions, confusion, and years of debate about what really happened in that room. Some reports say Murray tried to revive him by himself. Others say he looked for assistance. Some believe he froze, overwhelmed by the moment. But one thing everyone agrees on is this: when paramedics finally arrived, the room didn't look like a proper medical setup. It looked improvised. An IV bag hanging from a closet pole, scattered supplies on nearby surfaces, and a patient who hadn't been breathing for an uncertain amount of time. By 11:26 a.m., Michael Jackson was transported to UCLA Medical Center. Doctors worked urgently, but it was clear the situation had already reached a point no one could reverse. Hours later, the official report described the physical condition of a man the world believed they understood. Someone exhausted, overwhelmed, and carrying a level of pressure far heavier than most people could imagine. And behind all of that stands a question that still sparks debate today. Was Michael Jackson's final day the result of medical mistakes, or was it the unavoidable collapse of someone pushed far beyond human limits? Investigators still point to one key detail: the 30-minute gap between the moment Michael stopped responding and the moment anyone finally called for emergency help. That window remains one of the most heavily examined, confusing, and talked about parts of the entire case, leaving experts and fans wondering what truly unfolded during those missing minutes. According to Dr. Conrad Murray's earliest statement, he said he first noticed Michael slipping into distress around 11:40 a.m. But phone records later reviewed by investigators didn't match that timeline at all. They showed Murray making several calls, not to emergency services, but to personal contacts. One call lasted 11 minutes, another around 3, and a third connected just before noon. Not one of them was to 911. These calls became the first major conflict in Murray's timeline, and they pushed detectives to consider whether someone in that room might have been trying to handle things quietly instead of calling for help right away. Authorities never confirmed any wrongdoing, but the timeline raised serious questions that still linger today. Security staff later testified that when they entered the room, Murray wasn't speaking with paramedics. Instead, he was moving around the bedside area, unplugging things and picking up items. One guard described it as organizing, another called it clearing space. But in police notes, officers wrote a far more cautious phrase: possible cleanup. Nothing illegal was proven, but the difference between Murray's version and what witnesses remembered created a wave of confusion investigators never fully settled. Then came the rumor that blew up across fan forums. Several people claimed an unidentified visitor was seen near the hallway shortly before the 911 call was made. This same visitor was allegedly escorted into the house the night before and spotted again just after noon on the 25th. No official report ever confirmed who this person was or why they were there, and because of that, the story grew into one of the biggest mysteries tied to Michael's final hours. Even today, the identity of that visitor remains unknown, and fans still debate what their presence truly meant. Their name never appeared in the official files, but the idea that someone may have stepped in or out of that room during the most critical window became one of the strongest theories surrounding Michael's final hours. EMT logs later showed that when paramedics finally entered bedroom 12, the scene didn't look like an active medical emergency. The lights were dim, the equipment looked partly disconnected, and the IV line was still attached, but not set up the right way. Even the bottle of propofol, the key substance in the investigation, wasn't immediately visible. One detective summed it up clearly. The room didn't match the story, and that pushed investigators straight into the biggest mystery. What happened inside that missing half hour? Why wasn't help called the moment something seemed off? And what exactly had been moved, adjusted, or taken away before first responders showed up? Those unanswered questions created a gap, a 30-minute blank zone fans now call the half hour of darkness. At 12:21 p.m., the call that would shake the world was finally made, but it wasn't from Murray, not from a nurse, not from anyone with medical training. It came from a security guard who had sprinted upstairs after being urgently called. His voice was shaking, his breathing unsteady, and he told the dispatcher he's not breathing, trying to keep calm while the tension in the room leaked straight through his words. The dispatcher asked if CPR had started, and the guard said yes. But later, paramedics told investigators the CPR technique being used wasn't effective on a soft bed and should have started earlier. Then came the line that still echoes through the recording, a line that made first responders realize just how chaotic that moment truly was. We have a doctor here, but he's asking us to get help from emergency specialists. That one sentence froze investigators later on. Why wasn't the doctor taking full control? Why wasn't he the one on the phone? And why did someone else have to explain the situation instead of the medical professional in the room? When paramedics rushed inside, they expected chaos, loud instructions, fast movements, people scrambling to help. But the room felt strangely still. Michael was on the floor, unresponsive, with no clear reaction when checked. To trained eyes, it looked like valuable time had already slipped away, even though the EMTs still jumped straight into action. They always try, no matter what. One paramedic later admitted privately that the scene didn't look like something that had just happened. As they carried Michael downstairs, the whole house felt unnervingly quiet, except for the sharp instructions coming from the paramedics trying their best to turn things around. By the time they reached the ambulance, many of them understood the reality. The situation had already reached a point they couldn't pull back from. Fans would replay the 911 call for years afterward, analyzing every pause, every tone, every background sound. They pointed out how calm the caller sounded, how the doctor never spoke directly, and how the gaps in the call felt unusual. People argued about every detail, searching for answers that still haven't been fully agreed on. Investigators didn't reveal much publicly, but one retired detective summed it up in a documentary, saying it plainly, help was called, just not soon enough. And that's what made the 911 call so haunting. Not the panic you hear, but the long stretch of silence that happened before anyone finally picked up the phone and dialed for help. When the news exploded on the afternoon of June 25th, 2009, Michael Jackson is gone, the world reacted the same way it did when legends like Elvis or Mercury passed. Total shock, disbelief, people trying to explain something that didn't feel real. Within minutes, TV anchors were already saying phrases like possible overdose, and commentators began tossing out theories about medication, doctors, and the pressure of the comeback tour. They talked about causes, dosages, timing, all the surface-level details. But what no network focused on, not one headline mentioned, was the actual condition of the man who had been found in that room. Because the real shock didn't come from speculation. It came from what the official report showed about his physical state. When the autopsy findings were finally made public, there was no sensational twist or dramatic plotline. Just a clear clinical description of someone whose body had been pushed far beyond what it could handle. It painted a picture of a man carrying years of stress and exhaustion, hidden behind the image of a superstar the world thought could handle anything. Michael Jackson, the kid who shook up Motown at age 11, the performer who entertained presidents, kings, and millions across the globe, passed away weighing only around 112 pounds. His stomach was almost empty except for medication he'd been given. His hairline showed the lasting effects of the 1984 accident. His body carried signs of deep exhaustion and long-term sleep problems that no human could keep enduring. People imagined a dramatic collapse like something out of a movie, but the truth was far more human. Michael Jackson passed away as someone completely drained, someone who had given so much for so long that his body simply couldn't keep going. The coroner's description made that painfully clear, leaving a story that was heartbreaking not because of mystery, but because of everything he had carried behind the scenes. His heart had stayed strong for years, but non-stop stress had worn down everything around it. His muscles had thinned out, his immune system was tired, and his sleep cycle was barely functioning anymore. His mind had been running on fumes, trying to keep up with demands no one could carry forever. This wasn't the body of someone gearing up for 50 high-energy concerts. This was the body of someone who had been quietly fading behind the curtain while the world focused on lighting cues, choreography, and sold-out tickets. For years, Michael poured everything he had into performing, but the autopsy showed something tough to face. The stage didn't give that energy back. And then came the most heartbreaking line in the report, the one that changed how people understood his passing. Signs consistent with severe and prolonged physical stress. Not drugs, not drama, not one bad night, but a lifetime of pressure stacked on top of him. Fans grieved because a legend's life ended suddenly. Doctors grieved because they saw signs that a human had been worn down slowly, long before that final day. And in the weeks that followed, medical experts explained something the public had never truly realized. Real sleep isn't optional. It's not a luxury or something you can skip to stay productive. The kind of insomnia Michael struggled with, the type so severe he depended on heavy medical help just to close his eyes, is the kind that slowly breaks down every system in the body. It affects the heart, the brain, the immune system, everything. And his body showed exactly what long-term exhaustion can do when someone keeps pushing far past healthy limits. Lack of real sleep changes everything. It twists your mood, throws off your balance, messes with memory, and puts serious strain on the heart. It wears a person down from the inside out. Michael wasn't just tired. He was breaking down behind the music, behind the fame, behind that pressure to make every single note perfect. The This Is It rehearsals showed a man trying to hold himself together while the world expected the flawless version of him they remembered from 1983. The autopsy didn't read like some dramatic scandal. It read more like a report on someone who had been fighting a long, exhausting battle. And that leads to one of the hardest truths spoken quietly by one of the coroners. Michael Jackson didn't pass away in front of a crowd or under bright stage lights. He passed away in isolation, not surrounded by dancers or cheers, but in a quiet room with no music, no spotlight, and no applause. Just the slow unraveling of someone who had carried a massive amount of pressure for way too long. So the question rises, could things have turned out differently? Could his life have taken another direction? The documentary pulls the timeline backward and rewinds everything. It traces the final 60 days, the intense rehearsals, the warnings people noticed, the changes in his voice, the shakes in his hands, and the schedule that would have pushed any ordinary person past their limits. All of it builds a picture of someone trying to meet impossible expectations while his body was sending every signal that he needed real help and real rest. And that's the part that still leaves people wondering how much could have changed if the pressure around him hadn't been so heavy. Doctors say yes, things could have been different if Michael had been able to get real natural sleep, the kind every person needs. Not forced rest, not heavy medication, just normal hours of shut-eye. Even 4 or 5 hours a night might have given his heart, brain, and nervous system enough strength to handle the pressure he was carrying. But he hadn't slept properly in weeks. Some people close to the case say it might have even been months. One investigator described it as a sleep drought that no human could fight through. Others believe the schedule itself was almost impossible. Long rehearsals packed with intense choreography, daily meetings, endless planning, and the pressure to be flawless because perfection was the only version the world allowed him to show. That level of demand would push even a healthy 25-year-old close to burnout. For a 50-year-old man running on almost no real sleep, it was a disaster waiting to happen. Then comes the third part of the debate, the one that still sets off arguments every June 25th. What if Michael had been treated in an actual medical facility instead of a bedroom? Propofol, the medication used that night, isn't meant for home use under any circumstances. It's a hospital-grade anesthetic that requires full monitoring equipment and trained staff nearby at all times. Its effects need constant supervision from multiple professionals. Fans argue that, no matter the intentions behind using it, giving propofol outside of a proper medical environment made the situation extremely risky from the start. They believe the setup simply wasn't safe enough for a drug that powerful, and that this decision played a major role in how everything unfolded that morning. Some people call what happened a medical tragedy. Others say it could have been avoided. And then there are fans who believe something even simpler but far more painful, that Michael was pushed way beyond any normal limit. Not by a villain lurking in the shadows, not by some conspiracy, but by a system that had become hooked on Michael's talent like it was endless. A system that looked at him not as a person with limits, but as someone who could perform forever, with a voice that never failed and moves that never slowed down. To them, his comeback wasn't just a tour. It was a full avalanche of pressure. And Michael, Michael, wanting to rebuild his reputation and prove himself one more time, stepped right into that storm with everything he had left. The question that still hangs over every documentary, every investigation, every tribute is always the same. If Michael had gotten real rest, if someone had stepped in to protect him instead of expecting more, if the schedule had been built around his health, not his legend, would the king of pop still be here today? There isn't one clean answer, but there is one truth investigators, doctors, and fans keep circling back to. Michael Jackson didn't pass because of a single mistake or a single night. It was years of pressure, exhaustion, and isolation stacking up little by little until his body simply couldn't keep going. Nobody recognized how worn down he really was. Not until everything finally cracked. And maybe, just maybe, the real heartbreak isn't just that Michael is gone, but that the world didn't see he had been fading long before June 25th, long before the headlines, long before anyone understood how much he was carrying behind the scenes. Right away, people jumped to the easiest explanation. Overdose, doctor mistakes, medication gone wrong. But the official report told a different story, one far more painful and far more real. It stripped away all the headlines and revealed what had actually been happening during Michael's final years. The king of pop didn't just suddenly collapse. His body had been breaking down long before that day. He weighed around 112 pounds. His stomach held only medication given earlier. His arms showed signs of long-term medical treatments. His scalp still carried the effects of the 1984 accident hidden beneath a carefully placed wig that protected the sensitive areas. His muscles were thin, his immune system tired, his organs showing the strain of someone who had been pushing himself non-stop. This wasn't the body of a man gearing up for 50 shows. It was the body of someone pushed way past normal limits. Doctors said it looked like the result of prolonged physical stress. Paramedics said the scene felt like someone whose body had been struggling for a long time. And for the first time, the public finally understood what the people closest to him had feared quietly. Michael wasn't living like a superstar. He was living like someone trying to survive the weight of his own fame. The shock wasn't just how he passed, it was realizing how much of him had already faded before June 25th even arrived. The world thought they lost a king in one afternoon, but the report showed something harder to accept. They'd been losing him little by little for years. And then came the line in the findings that changed the entire meaning of his final chapter. A line that made everyone pause and rethink everything they thought they knew about his last days. Michael didn't pass away under bright lights or in front of a cheering crowd. He passed away alone in a quiet room, far from the applause he spent his entire life chasing. And 15 years later, the same question still splits people everywhere. Could Michael Jackson have lived? Doctors say yes, if he had been able to sleep naturally. Real rest, not forced sleep from strong medication. Weeks of insomnia had worn down his nervous system, something no human body can handle. If he had been able to get even a few steady hours each night, his heart, brain, and immune system might have had the strength to carry the pressure he was under. Others say the schedule itself was impossible from the start. Hours of intense dancing every day, full choreography run-throughs, meetings stacked on meetings, costume fittings, planning sessions, travel demands, press expectations, a calendar built like he was a machine, not a 50-year-old man already running on empty. If rehearsals had been lighter, if the tour dates were fewer, if he'd been given time to recover between sessions, maybe things would have gone differently. Then there's the third theory, the one fans argue about the most. They believe he should have been treated in a real medical facility, not in a bedroom. And this is where the biggest concern comes in. Propofol. It's not a sleep aid. It's not something meant for home. It's a powerful hospital anesthetic that requires trained professionals, proper monitors, and full equipment. Using it outside a medical setting added risks that no one should take lightly, no matter the intentions. And for many people, that choice remains one of the most debated and emotional parts of Michael's final chapter. It's a medication meant only for surgical rooms, places filled with trained professionals and equipment that can react in seconds if anything goes wrong. Using it inside a home wasn't just risky. It created a setup where even one small mistake could turn into a crisis. And that's why the debate still splits people today. Some call what happened a medical failure. Others say it was the result of a man pushed into extreme exhaustion. But both sides agree on one painful truth. Michael wasn't truly protected. He was 50 years old, running on almost no real sleep, expected to deliver the biggest comeback the music world had ever seen, surrounded by people who needed him to perform instead of rest. The question was never about his talent. The real question is whether anyone around him ever told him to pause, breathe, and take care of himself. In the end, the tragedy of Michael Jackson's final hours is surprisingly simple. His passing wasn't sudden. It was the last step in a long, slow breakdown that no one stepped in to stop. And that's why the same question stays alive after all these years. Was this fate or was it preventable? Now I want to hear from you. What do you think really happened? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, tap subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one for more stories this industry still tries to hide.